Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We are coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, historical neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so honored and so very happy that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show and let them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, and they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Apple, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Amazon Music, wherever you find your favorite shows. We have two fantastic guests today. First off, returning to the show, JD Peabody. He's celebrating book 2 in his Inkwell Chronicles series. It's called Race to Krakatoa. And later we'll be meeting Britt Gondolfi. She'll be celebrating Look Up Fontaine the Pigeon Starts, a Revolution. We would like to invite you to embark on a transformative journey with The Invisible Backpack, A Life of Courage, written by William Hartwick. Are you burdened by past hurts, grief, or trauma? William's heartfelt narrative, born from his own struggles with depression and Tourette syndrome, offers a pathway to lightening your load. Just like you, he knows the weight of an invisible backpack, growing heavier as life unfolds. But in his touching story, William invites you to courageously unpack it, making space for forgiveness, acceptance, tolerance, and love. Join William on a profound exploration of healing, blessings, and inner strength. Through William's vulnerability, he reveals the power of embracing your true self. Don't miss this inspirational tale of resilience and hope. Order your copy of The Invisible Backpack today and embark on a journey of self-discovery and courage. Get ready for a heartwarming adventure in Mommy's Day Off, the delightful picture book written by Jacqueline Christine. When young Louie's mom has to be away for a day, he's in for a wild ride with his dad. From waffle and ice cream breakfast to Wild West battles, they embark on an unforgettable journey filled with laughter and bonding. But as the day unfolds, Louie realizes there's a special magic that only his mom can bring to their home. Join Louie as he discovers the irreplaceable role his mom plays in his life, making Mommy's Day Off a touching tale of family, love, and the unique bond between a mother and her child. Get your copy today at Amazon or at JacquelineChristine.com. Attention all adventure seekers. Get ready to embark on an epic journey with Tim Wright's The Adventures of Toby Baxter middle grade series. Join Toby Baxter on his thrilling escapades filled with mystery, friendship, and courage. With 2 exciting books already in the series, now is the perfect time to catch up before the release of the highly anticipated 3rd installment. Book 1, The River Elf, The Giant, and the Closet, is a high-flying middle-grade fantasy. If you like daring journeys, hilarious characters, and heartfelt lessons about confidence, then you'll love the 1st installment in the series. Book number 2 is River Home for the Holidays, a humorous, tongue-in-cheek middle school age science fiction book. This quest is filled with holiday fun, dangers, and inspiration, sure to capture the imagination of lovers of thriller and fantasy adventures. But the adventure doesn't stop there. Be prepared for even more excitement in the upcoming release of book number 3, Aloha River Home, The Good Prophecy. Don't miss out on the excitement. Start your adventure today with books number 1 and 2 and be ready for Tim's book number 3 when it hits the shelves. The Adventures of Toby Baxter Middle Grade Series by Tim Wright. It's available wherever books are sold. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Washington. Our guest is returning to celebrate his great middle grade series. It's called the Inkwell Chronicles. Please welcome back to Reading with Your Kids, JD Peabody. Hey, JD, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. It's so great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Super glad to have you back. You were here not long ago to celebrate book 1 in the Inkwell Chronicles. Tell everybody, please, remind everybody a little bit about the characters we're going to meet in this series and what happened in book 1.
Yeah, so book 1 is about a brother and sister, Everett and B Drake. And at the beginning of the book, their father goes missing after a train crash. Everybody else assumes that he has died in the train crash, but there's no body. And so Everett and B are convinced he's still alive and needs their help. And so as they set off to rescue him, they cross paths with a group of actual famous authors that were known as the Inklings. And it turns out that these Inklings are also guardians of this sort of magical ink that's behind all the great creativity in the world. And it's running out, and there are evil, nefarious forces that would like to get their hands on this powerful ink. And so Everett and B have to go and find more ink and preserve it from an evil destiny, while at the same time finding their father, who's somehow mixed up in this as well. And so book 1 is that adventure of going to do those two things. And then book 2, so book 1 is called The Ink of Elspeth. And then book two takes them a little further afield. In book 1, they are largely in London and Oxford, and then up in Scotland. And then in book 2, another imposter ink has appeared on the scene that seems like it has some sort of powers as well, but it is a little bit dark and sinister and seems to have this sort of twist to it that is not as good and beneficial as the actual ink is. And so they set out on this quest to shut down this artificial ink. And that takes them on a really widespread journey where they go to Italy and then Egypt and India and end up in Indonesia on the little island of Anak Krakatoa.
You know, this is such a neat idea, the idea that there's magic ink that kind of inspires and brings all these stories to life. Where did that concept, that notion come from?
You know, the initial idea that I had came from reading the Chronicles of Narnia, and I first got this thought of, wouldn't it be cool? I don't know if you remember in The Magician's Nephew, where they have these green and gold rings. One color takes kids out of the world to another place, and one brings them back. And there were all these leftover rings at the end of the book, and I thought, and they buried them under this tree. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if years later somebody comes and digs up these rings and has a whole new set of adventures? But then I read The Last Battle that C.S. Lewis wrote, the final adventure, and somebody did dig up the rings and took them on this train, and they were lost in this train crash. And so, but then I got thinking about train crashes and thought, I wonder if there might have been a real train crash that inspired C.S. Lewis. And I started just digging around and realized that there was a very major train wreck in London in 1952 that they still do not know the exact cause of the crash. And so then I began to think, okay, what if we invented a reason for this crash? And so that's sort of got the wheels turning. And then this ink, that it's the villains who caused the crash of this train in pursuit of this ink. And so the ink really opened up all kinds of opportunities then to go to introduce great works of literature that I can drop little Easter eggs throughout the book to refer to. Well, really, the ink is behind that, or this was another inkling that wrote this, and begin to weave sort of this big net of all this great writing to hopefully introduce kids to some literature that they might not have found otherwise.
What a great idea and a great way to inspire kids. They're fascinated with your book. They're really into it. And it's like, I got to check that book out.
Well, and what I tried to do too was kind of have a lot of them be sort of subtle and hidden. So it might take a second pass through the book before they actually find it. It's not right on the top. I've got there's a story of a nurse who's at the site of this train crash that plays a key role, and I don't really even mention some of her history, but she was a real person who was this real groundbreaking hero in that train crash that sort of set the course of emergency medicine in Great Britain moving forward. And she happened to be American. She was African American and had really broken a lot of barriers already as a female in the Air Force at that time. And she ended up, she didn't have a pen to be marking any notes as she was working with these victims of the train crash. And so she used her own lipstick to mark their foreheads with an X of which ones had been treated and which hadn't. And so, of course, then as the story's going on, then she gets a hold of a pen with this ink in it that she's using that as well. So anyway, just kind of, but it's not really pointed out that this is an actual real story, just for people to discover kind of on their own later. But I do, on my website, I do have a secret page with all the hidden Easter eggs. If somebody wants to go and check, they can peek and find what they might have missed.
It's interesting when you're planting these Easter eggs or hiding these Easter eggs. How does that process? We've never talked about that on the show. How does that process happen? Do you set up first with like a list of Easter eggs you want to drop in there and then find moments to do it? Or are you just at a point in the story and you go, this reminds me of so-and-so and slide it in?
I think it was kind of both of those, depending on the time, especially in book one. Book one took me about 6 years to write through all its iterations. And so, there were a lot of just, my own favorites that I was just having fun and just weaving in, how could I make a connection here between these two authors or whatever. And then as I was going through the story, I would try to look for points where, instead of just entirely making something up, I could hook it into some local feature or find out what in that region might be something that I could incorporate in some way that kind of felt like it fell under the umbrella of the ink. So tried to do that both with historic events and people and books as well.
Yeah. When you're creating this world, because basically you're creating a universe. We've talked to different authors about how to me, it's hard enough for me when I'm reading fantasy or watching a fantasy, and there are some movies that are fantasy. I tap out after half an hour because I'm like, I have no idea what's going on here. How do you keep things straight? Not only the characters and the relationships, but also the physics of these universes that you're creating.
Yeah, that has been the biggest challenge for me. And when I was writing the first one, I oftentimes my agent, as he would read it, he would say, you can't do that. That's not how it works. And you think when you're writing you can just set whatever you want to be. It's your story, you can do whatever, but you still have to operate within the rules of how how the mechanics of this universe work, because your readers, especially kids, I think, are highly attuned to that, and they're going to know if it's cheating or if it's not really within the bounds of possibilities. Within, the ink doesn't do that, or there have to be reasons for every choice that you make, and so that was a big learning curve for me to try to go, okay, I am needing to abide by some laws in this universe. I can't just make up whatever I want and throw it in there.
Yeah. That's the world is so complex and rich, and it just, in my mind, it's like, what do you mean I can't suddenly say that the sun, there was an eclipse of the sun and that turned everybody
Right.
upside down?
Fortunately, my fantasy is based largely in a real world, or a parallel to our world. I don't know how some fantasy writers do it, where their imagination is far bigger than mine in terms of, creating scenes on different planets or whatever with creatures that are unlike anything I've ever seen or thought up of before. But mine was grounded in history. So I had a framework for a lot of the details. I didn't have to get too outlandish with some of my descriptions.
Yeah.
So that helped me.
It sounds like there's an element of magic in your story and in a lot of stories. And as somebody who's been performing educational magic shows at schools for 35 years, I understand the why kids like what I do. They it's like something, there's a silk, and then all of a sudden now it's a cane, and it's like, wow, it's like mind blowing. But the magic that you experience when you're reading a series like the Inkwell Chronicles, it's slightly different. There's not this pop that happens in front of your eyes. Why do you think so many kids and adults too, but so many people love diving into a new magical realm?
That's a good question. I think back to when I was about in fourth grade, and I first really vividly remember getting into a book and reading it and feeling like I was absolutely transported out of my own life, and kind of feeling like when I got done, of almost like I was coming up for air, and having to remember where I actually was. I think that sense of just being so caught up in something that can get you out of whatever is creating the anxiety or worries or stress in your daily life. I mean, it's a healthy form of escape, I think, that takes us into what we wish was possible in this world. And sometimes it's more perilous, but I think the idea of being able to step out of our own shoes in a way that maybe lets us be more free to be ourselves when we come back into it. I think it's just the freedom and the momentary relief from the burdens of the real world that, especially, it feels like so often kids are in such really difficult situations. It's hard to grow up, and there's so little control that you have of anything about your situation, and to be able to just step out for a minute is kind of a lovely thing.
Yeah. Do you ever, or have you ever taken the time to think that you are doing for kids today what the authors that you dove into did for you, that you're creating a world that is allowing them to kind of step away from their problems and live in this fantasy world that when they come up for air, as you said, they kind of have to look around and go, okay, where am I now? Where have I been? And I'm so glad I was able to take that trip.
Yeah, I feel very conscious of that possibility. It would be humbling to have that be true. You know, I would love that, because I really felt like when I was writing it, that was my hope, was really to even for myself to kind of recreate that sense of, as I was writing it, you know, that was my place of really being fully immersed in a different world, and to offer that to kids as well. That would be the ultimate, I think. You know, when I wrote it, I was really, I have OCD. And so I was in a really, probably at the peak or the low point of my onset of OCD, and it became really a safe place for my brain to escape what it couldn't otherwise. You know, it was just constantly processing all the time, and to have this place over here and really connect with my own inner 10-year-old again. And so it was a great, it served that purpose for me. So if it could do that for somebody else, I'd love that.
Yeah. You've also written books for adults, I see on your website, Perfectly Suited. Can you give us a quick little view of what that book is all about? Yeah.
Thanks for asking. That book was written over the same period of time as the first book of the Inkwell Chronicles. It took me about the same amount of time. I took about 5 years to work on that one as well. And that one is really at the crossroads of faith and mental health. And it was really describing in a lot what was going on with me, my journey through kind of what I call hitting my mental and emotional wall, and working through that with my faith and the tools that were there for me in that. And so I described that as kind of the book that shows what was going on for me. And then the Inkwell Chronicles was my therapy, or part of my therapy during that. So to me, they feel really connected. If you, I think for other people, it seems like what a random combination of books to write. But to me, they feel integrated because they were both true for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm so happy for you. You were telling us book one took 6 years to write. How long did you have to get book two out there?
Yeah, that was such a different experience. I think from the time that I had the contract to when I was supposed to deliver, it was about 6 months. And the deadline for that it created a very different writing experience. Although I will say there was a piece to the writing that was much easier because the universe was already created, and I did know the rules. I knew the characters. I knew how they would respond in different situations. And because the series really follows the same characters through each of the books. And so that gave me good footing and a good start to dive into it. And again, even though it was on deadline, it was just super fun to be back with the characters and really take them to new places and see the world through their eyes, and do the research on places that I'd never been, and again try to plant the little Easter eggs along the way, but expanding it into a more global experience.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be hoping to have you back later in the fall when book 3 comes out. Just let us know the title of that book so we can whet our appetites.
Yeah, book 3 is called Operation Bungaree. And I will say that book 2, when I finished book 2, I didn't have a contract for book 3. And I had ended book 2 on a major cliffhanger. And I got done and I thought, oh no, what have I just done? I don't know if I'm going to get a chance to write a third book. And so I had this moment of panic. But unfortunately they did come back and say, yes, we can finish this trilogy. And so I was much relieved and could actually land the plane. So, but I can't really say much about the plot of book 3 because, book 2, I wouldn't want to spoil the cliffhanger.
There you go. Well, don't spoil the cliffhanger. Come back in the fall. Let us know about book 3. In the meantime, check out books 1 and 2 of the Inkwell Chronicles. We're real excited. And I'm really glad you get book 3 in because I hate when I get to, it's about a year ago, I watched the series on one of the streaming services and I was really into it and it ended and then I found out, what do you mean there's no season 2? What?
Yes. It's the worst.
So book 3 is coming. There is going to be a conclusion, and that makes me very happy. And we're about at the conclusion of this. So, JD, where can people go to find out more about the Inkwell Chronicles and find out more about you?
You can go to my website, jdpeabody.com. And if you want to know some of the Easter eggs, you can go jdpeabody.com/invisible. And it's a hidden little page there that will reveal some of the secrets. But the books are available pretty much wherever books are sold. I always try to encourage people to check out the indie booksellers in your local market. But it's available on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, pretty much wherever you buy your books.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of the Inkwell Chronicles. Our guest has been JD Peabody. Hey, JD, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by The Adventures of Patch, delightful series of adventure stories written by David Gibby. Overwhelmed by endless hours of screen time, craving a wholesome escape for your little ones? Introduce them to the enchanted world of The Adventures of Patch the Bear. Crafted with love and imagination, these tales serve as a passport to wonder-filled adventures far from the digital buzz. Let Patch light up your child's world, allowing them to explore, dream, and imagine beyond boundaries. This is a really fun series that you and your kids will absolutely adore. The Adventures of Patch, written by David Gibby. Are you looking for a creative way to bond with your kids? Let me tell you all about Drawing with Your Kids, the ultimate destination for artistic adventures. Join us as we dive into the wonderful world of children's books with renowned illustrators guiding you step by step. From beloved characters to whimsical scenes, unleash your imagination and create cherished memories together. Whether you're a seasoned artist or just picking up a pencil, there's something for everyone at Drawing with Your Kids. Please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com, and click on the Drawing with Your Kids link at the top of the page and let the creativity flow. Drawing with Your Kids, where every stroke brings stories to life. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Louisiana. Our guest is here today to celebrate. Her new children's book is called Look Up! Fontaine the Pigeon Starts a Revolution. Please welcome to the show, Britt Gondolfi. Hey, Britt, how are you?
So great, Jed. Thank you so much for having us. This is so exciting.
Delighted to have you on here.
Yes, this is our first children's book. Amanda and I are longtime friends, and this has been a long-time dream for us to have this little poem take off and take flight, and getting to talk about it with people and share our story it's been a fairy tale. I'm not trying to be cliche, but we've we've hoped this would happen for a long time, and it finally is.
Excellent. Well, let's tell everybody your illustrator's full name.
Her name is Amanda Romanick, and she is a phenomenal graphic artist and illustrator, and she was professionally trained at SCAD out in Savannah, and she's also my best friend, so it's really exciting to get to collaborate with her.
That's really, really wonderful. We talk here on the podcast a lot about the process of creating children's books, and there's lots of different ways to do it, traditionally published, independent and self-published. I was really amazed to learn that you and Amanda's teaming up and working together, knowing each other for so long. I figured that was the norm, that there'd be these teams of authors and illustrators together, and they work together, and they do all this other stuff, do everything as a team. I was surprised to learn that that's really not the case. Typically, especially with traditionally published books, there's very little, if any, communication between author and illustrator. It's
rare, and we sort of got the impression that that's how it worked. When we first came up with the concept, I was trying to find a literary agent, and we were told right away, if you work with a literary agent, she's just going to represent you as an author, take you to a publishing company, and then the publishing company, if they like what you've done, they will find someone who they think will best illustrate the book, for sales, and so it's successful. It was kind of a little miniature miracle that Amanda and I got to do this together, and I think it's because we had envisioned for a long time we would do this as self-published artists, and fate and luck or destiny would have it that we would get introduced to a literary agent that would be able to sell us as a package. Amanda had done so many different sketches and designs of characters and concepts over the years that by the time we were fortunate enough to find someone who would represent this poem, we had a beautiful product, seeded. So it was a blessing. So huge thank you to Baker and Taylor and Paw Prints and everyone that's made this possible. Our kids are so excited. We have 2 children. I have a daughter. She has a son. They're 2 weeks apart. My daughter's oldest. She would insist that I say that, but they're really excited, and it's beautiful for our kids to see us as moms, working and being creative and collaborating together. And, when we got to read our book to our kids for the first time, it was just a memory that I'm going to have forever.
Well, I'm really excited because, when things are created from love, they're just, you can just tell that there's love behind it. And listening to you, seeing your expression as you're talking about this process, we haven't even talked about what the book is yet. I just know that love is going to be felt while you're reading, while parents who are listening to this look up with their kids.
Yeah, it's a short poem. It's a short book, it's originally written as sort of a spoken word poetry song, so it's not this lengthy, late night bedtime story. It's a short story with a big message. But it took years. It took years and years and years for it to get to the point that it is now. And it started as just a funny joke that we made on a walk together. It evolved into a note in my iPhone, in my notes app. We made this joke about, birds being mad at people for being on their phones and wanting to poop on us. And it ironically, the poem was birthed on a phone, the exact device that the book is warning people, to have deep moderation with. It was written on a phone, full disclosure. And it sat there for years and evolved and, became a song that I would sing to our kids and we would all laugh and joke about. And now it's in the flesh. It's a real thing that we can touch and look at. It's so incredibly illustrated.
That's wonderful.
I couldn't imagine it being better.
So let's talk a little bit about the story that we're going to experience.
Well, it's all about nature and humanity, and what has happened to humanity with this massive revolution of technology. We put the word revolution in the title because there has been a revolution of accessibility to one another, to ideas and information. And people say we're more connected now, and we're also more disconnected than we've ever been from each other. And so we were thinking to ourselves, there needs to be another revolution where we find balance between all the advantages that screens and technology and these satellites and this massive web of information that we're building as humanity. We need to find a balance between letting it take us over and take our attention spans, and how do we use it in a wise way? And so the shortest version of this story is that this is a poop joke book about birds consciously and strategically and compassionately pooing on our cell phones to wake us up. It's a Trojan horse for a conversation about cell phone use. Uh-huh. I hope that after parents and kids read and laugh about the absurdity of the story, that people can talk about when they got their first cell phone. What was life like before cell phones? Who within your family, lived in the age of typewriters, or who lived around when the first computer came out? Or what about landlines? I just feel like children who are being born right now and in the past 10 years or 20, truly, they don't know that there was a time before this great technological revolution. And I think it's really important for us all to remember how new the technology is, so that we will be cautious that it doesn't, pull us away from each other or our humanity.
You're so right. I look back, I joke here in the podcast and oftentimes say I'm almost 100 years old, but in terms of what it was like when I was growing up compared to what it's like today, it's night and day. And there are certainly some things, the idea when I was a kid to think that I could walk around with this little plastic thing in my pocket and I could take pictures and videos and listen to music and send a message not only to my friend who lived around the corner, but to virtually anywhere in the world, it would have been absurd. I'm like, that couldn't possibly happen. But it did happen. But on the other hand, I am connected. I'm connected with the kids who live with us when they studied here in Boston. Now they're back in China and India and Italy. But the communication I have with them, it's a quick text. It's not like it was when I was a kid and a young adult, where I would get on the phone and have a 20, 30, 60-minute conversation with a different person every night.
That's beautiful. I love those, the late night phone calls.
Yeah.
Have to keep in touch with your friends. I know. It's so interesting how it's come in waves because, your grandparents would have said, we had to sit down and write a letter, because phone calls were so expensive,
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, wow, we are such communicators. Humanity, we just want to share our feelings and our thoughts and our experiences and hear other people's. And we've put so much work over the course of humanity into figuring out how can we get in touch with each other. And now we have something straight out of Star Trek or Star Wars. Remember the scene in Star Wars where there's the little holograph of Princess Leia sitting on the person's hand and she's like, Obi-Wan, you're our only hope. I feel like, children born in the 50s and 60s and 70s, imagining what we have now must feel as wild as just having a holograph in your hand, where it's like FaceTime my grandmother and boom, there she is. No matter where you are in the world, your grandmother's face is, not holographed in front of you, but it's miraculously there. And I, don't want us to take it for granted. And then I don't want it to, have us constantly in a neck down situation. The whole premise of Look Up came from a little drawing Amanda had done of our pigeon holding a little protest sign, trying to get people's attention, but no one's looking at him. And it's like, yeah, that's our goal. We want people to look up as opposed to looking down, because when you're in the grocery store or at the doctor's office or at the coffee shop, places where people might kind of churn up some small talk's not happening. Right. We're looking down, and I think it's weird.
Yeah.
And sad.
It is weird, and it is sad. And, I think at least for me, the communication that we're having with friends, which is usually a quick text or whatnot, it's not as rich, it's not as full as the conversations. Because you can't, I'm able to see you right now. I'm able to hear your voice. And even if I wasn't able to see you, I could sense by your tone of voice whether you're happy, whether you're being sarcastic, making a joke. You'll lose a lot of that with just text on a screen.
Oh, and, when we comment on social media, we're not only existing in smaller fragments of communication, like you're saying, as opposed to a dialogue where you hear someone's voice, you can hear their words, their tonality. Yeah, you lose all of that in text message. Rest in peace to all of the relationships that have been broken because someone sent a text instead of picking up the phone to call, or even, more crazy. What if instead of texting or calling, we would sit down and have those harder conversations?
Yeah.
And that's what I think is the irony of this connected, disconnected time.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It is weird. It is weird. And you're right about us looking down. We talk here in the podcast, if you want your kids to read, let them see you reading. Model that behavior. And if we need to be conscious of what the behavior that we're using when we're on the phones. And if we're always looking down, what a great example it would be if our kids saw us looking up and noticing the sky, noticing the trees, noticing the pigeons that might want to poop on our heads.
I hope from now on, after you read the book, every time you see a bird, you're like, oh, I got to put it away. We want to create a word association between birds and phones and just putting it away. Yeah. But it's really difficult for parents. I'm 35 years old and my daughter is 7. And I grew up as the last generation to live a screen-free childhood. We had television. We were begging our parents for Nintendos for Christmas. It's not to say, we're living in the 30s or 40s where, there is no screen, nothing in the house. Go outside, we're listening to records or radio if you're lucky. But all that to say, when I had my daughter, I realized that you're a perfect parent before you have a child, because I had always imagined in my mind, no screens, no technology. I'm going to hide the phone from her. We're going to live like it's the 80s, she won't even know it exists, but life happens. And, I ended up going to school when my daughter was 3, and then the pandemic happened, and I'm like, oh my goodness, now I'm guilty, as Taylor Swift would say, I'm guilty as sin for putting my child in front of it. And when I was in school, getting my law degree, I'd have friends ask me, like, well, how are you doing this with a child? And I was like, Disney Plus, and I don't want parents to think that we're writing this book from some holier than thou, we've got our technology and our kids and screen time figured out. No, we wrote this book because we struggle with balance. And I recently realized, I'm like, oh goodness, okay, the book comes out in 5 days. And to be honest with you, I just got a work from home job and I'm promoting the book online. I'm like, I think I'm on my screen right now more than I have ever been. Mm-hmm. And with my daughter, me just getting out of law school and starting to work, she's gotten into the habit of being on it more than she's ever been. And so the other day I was like, that's it. I'm going to hide it. I'm hiding it. We're going to have a screen detox. And I'm having these fantasies of just, birds chirping. We're in the garden together. Phones are gone. My daughter was devastated. It was, a holy war in this house as I tried to explain to her, that we really do need to take a break and feel what it feels like. Mm-hmm. And it is no easy task at this point. And my daughter's only 7. Mm-hmm. And I think I've been okay with trying to create balance, but they're powerful. The technology and the desire that it puts into the child to want to have the stimulation of either a YouTube or a video or a game, or even if it's educational, these programs are really, really desirable and create an addiction. And it's been this bizarre irony of like, I've always wanted to share a piece of poetry with the world on this level. And it's a kid's book, and it feels like a blessing, but it's all about addiction. And it's a pretty heavy subject. I mean, that's why it's a poop joke book. That's why we try to make the story as light as possible, because if we really peel back the layers and talk about how do we feel when we're at a restaurant and I'm like, oh, God, just take the phone. I'm sorry. You know, like I never thought that I would be in that position, but I do. And it's hard. Yeah. It is really, really hard. And I don't have the answers to what we can do. I just know that, you know, as our main character says in the book, the situation is poo. The situation of all of us looking down, it's poo. We don't know what to do, but we know that this is a doo-doo situation and we need change.
Wow. You know, I think the first step in dealing with a problem is recognizing it. And it's wonderful that you are taking the time to be aware of what's going on in you and your daughter's life. And it's fantastic that you're sharing that message with the world, because I think this is something that that every parent is going to struggle with ongoing. My kids are in your age group, and again, it wasn't as big a deal. I do remember the time we got our kids phones early for communication. They weren't smartphones. They weren't going online. My son, in one situation, cost me $200 because he was sending texts to his girlfriend, and they were like, hello, hello, how are you? And it was a nickel or a quarter for everything.
Oh, the cost of young love in the early 2000s. Wow.
And I felt bad because when I went to the store to say, hey, what is this? What is this? Do you have a daughter? Yes, I have a daughter, but it's your daughter. And I sat down with her, and she's like, no, come to find out, it was my son and his girlfriend. And the texts were ridiculous. Hey, what's up? Nothing. And I'm like, I'm spending $200 for this.
Guildenstern would be appalled.
But, you know, for my kids, it was really important for me to help my kids be media literate, to understand what kind of media they were consuming. And I still think it's very important for all parents to help their kids be media literate. But I think right now it's really important for parents to be more media literate be more literate about the media they are consuming, and not only what they're consuming, but how much of it they're consuming. Because we're all, I mean, like you, my work is done with screens. But there's still a lot of times I spend scrolling through Instagram or Facebook or checking my whatever.
If you live online, if you have any enterprise or idea or project that requires getting in touch with people, you are going to be on your screen. You know, there's no way to get around it. I think it's just a question of how can we have balance and moments away from it, you know, and I don't want my daughter to have childhood memories of me looking at social media when she needs my attention. And I will be honest, you know, just to open the floor for parents to admit this to themselves if you're like me, but there are times where my daughter is trying to reach me and the screen's got me.
Yeah.
And I've got to just be aware that that's a thing. And if I don't want her to have that struggle, you know, I'm going to have to admit my faults. And when I told my daughter, I was like, okay, we're hiding them. Actually, I did one worse. I did a sort of tooth fairy thing. I was thinking I was going to tell her that I hid them, but then I realized that if I told her they were hidden in the house somewhere, she'd tear this place apart to find them. So I told her we shipped them off to a company that was going to hold them until our prefrontal lobes were healed. did a little biology lesson about the brain, and it did not calm her down at all. She did not want to hear anything about the prefrontal lobe. But I told him that they were gone temporarily, so she would be calm and also know that it was not available. And then she says, "Well, what about you? Well, what about your Instagram? What about all of your emails? You're always looking at that for work." And I was like, out of the mouth of babes. You were absolutely right. So now, in addition to me keeping her technology's hiding spot a secret, I am really trying to hide my use from her. Not that I'm like being mischievous, but if I need to use it, I don't want to really do it in front of her. I'm going to kind of like step off in a way. I just don't want her to think that me holding this piece of technology constantly in my hand as a perpetual appendage is the norm. And it's taking a great unlearning from me. But, we're in this experimental phase because I feel like if I'm going to have this book about getting off of your phone, I need to really try to live the virtues. So we're in 5 days before the book comes out. I'm like, okay, that's it. Digital detox.
Well, I wish you well with your detox. I think it's a good idea for all of us to take time away from our screens and just enjoy family and friends and nature.
Yeah, there are other things to do. There's a million things to do besides looking down. And there's a million things to look at when you're looking down. And I think that that's the problem, is that between the million things that we have to look at and the million things that we have to do, sometimes it's easier to look than to do.
Yeah.
But it's always much more fun and more memorable to do. And so, yes, that's our hope. Our hope is that this silly poop joke book will inspire people to, look down less and do more.
Imagine that. Imagine if a poop joke can really make a difference in the world.
Well, the little birds in our story, it's all set in New Orleans. They're just trying to make a little difference locally where they are. They're reaching us how they think they can, which it's messy, but it's here as a joke.
Messy job. Someone's got to do it.
I know. The goal is to awaken mass consciousness, and in our imaginations, the birds are really interested in taking up that initiative.
I'm curious now that this book is out there and you and Amanda have this book and you're going to be sharing it with the world very soon. More books coming from this team?
Yes, absolutely. We are working together on several stories and concepts, with the main theme being nature, which humans are nature. We are animals. We forget sometimes, but this concept of nature calling humanity back to ourselves.
Yeah.
There's lots of other areas in which nature would love for us to behave more in harmony with her.
Yeah.
And with ourselves. And so, yes, there are more books coming about play, about protecting our environment, about pollinators, about recess. We have a list of social issues that we're wondering, how can our little cadre of birds inspire a positive impact without pooping on everyone? I mean, we may start with a poop joke book, but I don't think that'll be our forever theme. I think our forever theme is getting people to be more connected with each other.
Well, one of the things I want to encourage people is when they look up Fontaine the Pigeon Starts a Revolution, find a tree to sit under with your kids and read it together. And then after you read the book, just look up into the canopy and talk about all the millions of things that are going on in that tree.
So much, from up above to down below.
Yeah.
And another thing I'll, just chime in is that you do buy the book. We would love it if you would buy it from us. We're traditionally published artists, which means you can get this book from Amazon, Walmart, Target, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. But Amanda and I, we want to act like we're self-published. And so we have a website, fontainethepigeon.com, and you can get the book from us, and it'll always come with a signature and a special dedication and some art to bring it to your home. So
excellent. Well, let's. So the website is fontainethepigeon.com.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a beautiful website. There's lots of bright colors there, and I think you'd enjoy it a whole lot.
Yeah, it's a little bit more about our story, and we'll put all of our podcasts and all that jazz up there if you're interested. And yes, and it'll always come with a little something extra. In Louisiana, we have a phrase called lagniappe. It's just French for just a little something extra. So if you get it from us, you get a little bit of lagniappe.
Awesome. We've had a great time speaking to the author of Look Up, Fontaine the Pigeon Starts, A Revolution. Our guest has been Britt Gondolfi. Britt, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking a minute to spotlight our book.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. In the meantime, please be sure to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/Reading with Your Kids, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram and TikTok, and at Jedley Magic on Twitter. And of course, we'd love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. First, starting with our guests, JD Peabody and Britt Gondolfi. Also want to thank my amazing team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all of her support, but most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.